of Astun technology.
Hello, everyone. This is a classic of somebody said to me yesterday, do you get nervous? I said, no. Actually, I do. So I'm a little bit, up in the headlights and all that sort of stuff. There's my presentation of what to do when your favourite ETL tool gets too expensive. But I'm not going to mention anything, but it's a quick disclaimer. If you've got enough time to try and read that bottom piece, basically, I'm not criticising existing software that is pretty phenomenal. I've never actually used it, but I know a lot of people who have. They were bought, I think, by a private equity firm. They're a Canadian firm. They've got 3 letters in their software. You're probably guessing who I'm talking about, and it's not ETL. Basically, they got bought for quite a lot of money. Well, a lot of money, a considerable amount of money. One of the guys retired because I think his son got ill, so he wanted to do more for society as opposed to, I can't remember the terminology. Anyway, so it's not criticising them at all. The other thing I wanted to mention is the second bullet point. I could try and use this, couldn't I? This bit here. You'll see how nervous I am soon. Anything that's not a screenshot, I've tried to use Google Gemini to create. So, yes, I will touch on that shortly, I think. So, trying to look like I'm techie, I'm not. I used to be, but I'm not really anymore. I just want to go through my open source and ETL history, what I fondly call TLAs, and then we'll get down some business, what is GDAL, breaking it down, what can you do with it, some specifics, my business Astun, if you want to know where that comes from, which you probably don't, but take the letters of that, rearrange it, and you've got my surname. We do a lot with vector data, although we do stuff with raster data and various things. And I'll just go through a couple of examples to show some scenarios where the new version of GDAL might be able to be good for people if they want to use it. One other thing I've just been on a workshop without a computer. I was the only one without a computer that had QGIS on it with Ant Scott. He was doing all about QGIS modelling. That uses GDAL under the hood to do a lot of the processing. If you wanted something that's the equivalent to a Canadian 3-letter thing that I mentioned earlier, you could always look in there. It's pretty powerful what it can do. If you're more of a GUI type of person, that's another TLA. I've let it out. That's another 3-letter thing. Anyway, so my history relates around a thing called MITab. I did search for it before I started this presentation. The slide on the left is actually a Swedish company, looks a bit like IKEA. But back in the day, which is, I will scarily say, over 20 years ago, I was looking for a map info translator, something to take map info files. I used to be part of a business that was acquired a long time after I left it by an open source sponsor actually called iDocs. We used to be a map info reseller. Map info had their own proprietary format. So I was looking for something to process that in an ETL style of thing. And I found MITab. That's, for my disclaimer, the picture you see on the right is generated by Gemini, just so we're all clear. The website's even funkier than that, it's even more old school. But basically, I found the thing that would take map info files and be able to do translations. They introduced me to OGR, which then introduced me to GDAL. So there's my history there, and then I set up Astun. So this is just a bit of an open source history of how things were. If you get round to, this is useful actually, around about here, I started looking at map server because I was also looking at something to replace a map info piece. It's a kit called Map Extreme. It's about 10 grand a CPU. If you remember those sort of pricing, map server wasn't. And then I started Astun, and then around about this time in 2005, and then OSGeo was formed. I saw Joe here earlier. We were one of the hello Joe. We were one of the 11 who, I think it was 11 or 12 of us who were at a meeting in Stansted. At Stansted Airport, I think, wasn't it? And there is a photo which I should have brought up. So there weren't 180 people able to be accommodated like we've got here today, or when you do your big OSGeo events. So, right, what's a TLA? I'm hoping you're wondering what a TLA is. If you put it into Google, a temporary land association, so that's when you get into farming and stuff like that. Well, it's also known as a 3-letter acronym in my world. So there's a few of them at the top. I won't explain the first one, but GIS and TLAs, there are a lot of them around. So hoping to get a bit of interaction from everyone. So I'd like everyone to stand up, please, and you'll be pointed out if you don't. So we're going to go through a few TLAs now. Does anyone not know what any of these are? If you don't, you can sit down. And apologies for people. Well, if you start jumping, you might get there. Sorry. And I do apologise. Do you want to put your hand up? So I do apologise. I didn't notice you. So people know this one. So they should be fairly simple. You're all GI bods. Anyone not know any of these? And be honest, if you don't know any of them, I want you to be able to, if I was to ask you to say, yeah, we've got WKT, WKB, and GML. Does anyone not know what all three of those? So I can pick people out if anyone wants to be quizzed. If you don't know, you can sit down. You can sit down.
You know these ones, Mike.
Yep, we've got well-known text, we've got well-known binary, and we've got geographic markup language. So you're all pretty good so far. So the third one, which is the tricky ones, KML. Everyone know that one? Google Earth, keyhole markup language. Google Earth used to be keyhole. SLD, OGR. No, there's no actual definition of OGR. Everyone just sit down. No, everyone down because nobody knows what OGR stands for. So anyway, that's a bit of interaction. It's got my nerves still high, but anyway. So I was going to. Somebody said to me earlier as well, where are all your goodies? You know, the Astun goodies. Well, actually, I put this into Google about GDAL, and it's the open source geospatial toolkit. And then I had this on my keyring. And I thought, I wonder, sorry, I've got that wrong. It's the Swiss Army knife of open source toolkits, is what Google came back with. And I thought, why don't we buy a load of these, put Astun on there, you know, it was really quite cool. People would probably enjoy them. Then I got paranoid that, you know, could somebody do some damage with a under an inch knife blade? I thought, no, okay, we're not going to do that. So that's where the history of that slide came from. So GDAL, pretty powerful tool. Does everyone know what GDAL is? Has everyone used GDAL before version 3? Has anyone used GDAL since version 3? I could have done that as a stand-up one, couldn't I? This is all about GDAL 3. So if you go back to my history that I was talking about, when I first came across OGR and GDAL, documentation wasn't great. You had to work things out. If you got parameters in the wrong order, you had a nightmare with it. But as a summary of what it sort of does coordinate transformations, manipulation and processing. You can do analysis with it, and I've just seen some of that from what Ant was doing. There is a programming library, so I think that, I can't remember them all, but there's some Python modules and things so you can program with it. That's as far as my tech goes. I understand the principles. But there's a really nice thing called the command line interface, which is how I got associated with it, running executables with these parameters. The big thing about it is that it can read and write 100 raster formats and about 80 vector formats. So if you start combining those things together, there's a lot that you can do without a GUI. You start doing it. So I wanted to really highlight this to people so you understand what's there. If you see slides like this, a lot of this presentation comes from what I looked through a PowerPoint by people who did it, these guys, and there's a YouTube just highlighting the changes of things that have happened. So if you see this sort of styling, I've taken it straight out of their presentation. I didn't want to be trying to rip anyone off or anything like that. People probably, who doesn't know Paul Ramsey or not heard of Paul Ramsey? He was one of the original. Okay, so put your hand up so everyone can see. That's good. Yeah, so there's a few more now. It's good when people are honest and up front. So Paul Ramsey, very smart guy. He was set up refractions research over 25 years ago, I think. Anyway, he was always very frank. He's got a great blog called Clever Elephant. So if you ever want to go and have a look at that, he says it how it is. As you can see, the command line options of the tools: burn the village to the ground and build it all again. I thought that was quite good. There were other options there as well. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going to go through. It's a bit of a whirlwind, really, to try and give you a few ideas and tasters of what you can do. There's no practical demonstration. It's all on a PDF. You can download the PDF, and all of the screenshots or things that I've got hyperlinks out to the help pages. So if you do want to go and do some research to see whether it would help you, you can go forward and do that. So here's a few of the rester. Oh, this is a good tool. We'll go up to about here. These are all screenshots I've pieced together. But you can see this, you know, if you want to do some rester hill shading, you can generate a relief map. You can compare two data sets. You can create contours if you wish. I'm sure things like this would have helped with your ordnance survey over the years, being able to do this sort of stuff. There's a whole ream of things. I'm not an expert on the raster stuff. I'm not an expert on the vector stuff, but I know a bit more about the vector stuff. There's also what's coming GDAL 3.11. There's what's called pipelines. So I'll get to those in a little while. And then you've got vector commands that you can do. So this is obviously on vector data. So if you want to go in and you want to buffer some things, or if you want to check the coverage, which I think is a bit like a topology, that's a polygon one. There's a whole ream of things you can do. So if you're a company, and there's somebody I've seen from here who doesn't know me, but I've seen other OSG events, and I can't remember his name because the guy runs Address Cloud. Can't remember your name, sorry. Mark. Sorry, Mark. You do a lot of processing of data. You probably use GDAL already, but this is the sort of thing where you might want to build a pipeline to take data in, process it, and then output it on the other side. That's a good example, but it is in use by various companies around. So moving on. I only have to look at Ian if I'm running out of time. So, and then there's a whole ream of other stuff that comes along. So there's more vector commands. There's some really good other bits which I'll get to. There's driver specific things. So, and in the previous presentation was talking about GDAL. So it's got some commands. So if you had a geo package that you wanted to vacuum basically, and then send it off to someone else, you can just run a single command. It will do it for you. Really neat stuff that's in there. Did I say it's open source? So there's no fee for it, but if you want to sponsor OSGeo or the project specifically, everyone welcomes cash. I've got some brown envelopes. I haven't really. I've just got a bit of paper, but anyway. So the things I want to sort of touch on, and I've got no idea of my timing, so I didn't start a stopwatch. I'm just going to go through these different commands, which are ones that stood out to me from things that we do at Astun. So you've got GDAL info, which is basically you can inquire about a data set. So this one, it will tell you the coordinate system that's present, various bits of metadata that might be sitting within it, and a description that's there. You can actually write some of this data back to an output data set if you wish. If you were somebody who was heavily involved in metadata, which I know there's an ex-colleague who's here, you could be doing things where you could pick up data from data sets and know when they were last updated and automatically update a metadata portal if you wanted. So you can automate these things. The whole aim here for me is automation is king. Do it once, forget about it, automate it. You've then got the old favourite, which is now called GDAL convert. There are a few different commands. You've got a raster one and a GDAL vector type. Now the GDAL used to have a series of commands, and the vector used to be under the OGR to OGR. So there are two differences. It's all under the banner of GDAL, and then you start saying then start drilling into whether you want to look at vector data or raster with your commands that you do. So here's a really nice. Gemini is really good, or ChatGPT or whatever. You know, this generative AI, except for text. And you will see a few of these today. I don't know what it is. I mean, you can say generate me an image with no text, but that makes this more tricky for me. This is a one-off presentation, so I did put loads of time into it, but not as much as I could have. Anyway, this is the drill down of some of the things. We're going to be going down into this vector layer really to just talk about some of these things, and these are a few examples that I wanted to highlight. So next slide is on the GDAL vector convert, which, as I mentioned, that used to be called OGR to OGR. As I've also said, any of these screenshots, click on them on the PDF if you are interested. It will take you straight through to the GDAL documentation for it. There's a lot of different things you can do within here. The key thing really being it's changed from OGR to OGR, but you can be doing things of different layer creation options and output formats. There's a thing here which I'll touch on later called GDAL-G, which is the GDAL algorithm. That means that you can stream things together, keeps things in memory, and you don't need to write to disk. If you've got smaller data sets, apparently that's okay. If you've got big ones, you need a lot of RAM, or you've got a lot of big swap file. I've got 5 minutes, I'm going to speed up. This one's a really good one, and this one I mentioned to Ian, who's done a lot, I think, with JTS. This is all to do with buffers. These screenshots that I've got here, I actually put some time into putting them into one image. You get them from the PostGIS help files. Basically, you've got all these options when you want to create a buffer. And this uses the same algorithms, but in different languages, I guess. Some are in C++, some might be in a different Java, but all based around the GEOS framework of stuff. So it's a similar open source tools that are being used within different programming languages and stuff. So they've been tried and tested. It's inside PostGIS, as I mentioned. This is something else you can do, which is the word, which I'm not going to get confused with, which is layer algebra, that Gemini got confused with. Up here, that's the correct spelling. It's a really nice name, I actually think, because you're doing comparisons of data sets and how you want what type of algorithm to come out. And this is a nice visual representation of what happens with each of these options, the operations that you want to input. Sort of make sense? Can I just ask you, is the 5 minutes until question time? So I've got about 8 now, haven't I, really? There'll be no questions. Okay, I'll slow down a little bit. There's GDAL vector SQL, so that's where you can put in SQL statements from the command line into inquire about the data sets you've got. I won't try and go through all of them. The things that I like, there are different dialects you can use. So there's an OGR dialect, there's the database, if it's, say it's a Postgres backend database, you can pump in an SQL that's specific to that database language. Also, you've got the SQLite for geopackage and various things like that. So that's quite a nice thing to be aware of. It means that you can output data where you can say select star where value is X and output a layer from it, because you can start doing this sort of stuff when you, yeah. This is a really good one. And I'm only saying Ordnance Survey because they're a large data holder. But if you want to do some things where you want to simplify things, this is just online work. You can simplify things. You can also do it on polygon data sets. You can also tell it that you don't want to have any gaps left. So you can also do that where you want to find out if there are any. Does anyone remember what slithers were from digital? Oh, good. Lots of nodding heads there. That wasn't a stand up, but that sort of stuff, you know. So when you've got lots of data coming together, you want to find out whether you want to make sure everything's a good data set. This one's quite close to my heart, and this isn't really this isn't from OGR, but this was an example, basically segmentized. Is anyone aware of strip maps in traffic systems? So even before the stuff I talked about earlier, so 30 years ago, I worked for the Roads and Traffic Authority in Australia with a nice bit of software that had its own segmentation error, which would shut the whole system down. It's called ArcView, from a 4-letter company that sounds like, oh, anyway, I can't remember. But basically, a strip map, you would take a section of the road and then produce some statistics, put it all on a single map. In those days, people had big plotters. You'd print it out to an A0, and then it was very easy for people to see their section of road because you'd have different officers who are responsible for their pieces of the road. So that's segmentized. I wasn't aware that you could do that. This is, I talk about map info, it's sort of a historic data type nowadays, a tab file, but it's still used, it's still out there quite a lot, I think. Shape file, slowly being replaced, I think, more and more by geopackages, but it's still out there a lot of old systems. This command is quite nice. I remember having to write things where you'd have to check if there was an ID file, .map, all the different file types. You can say, copy this file to this from one location to another or convert it. 2 minutes. Sorry, I missed that. I'll keep facing this way, Ian. Reading from the screen. So, I mentioned this briefly. If you receive a geopackage, or you want to send a geopackage to someone, you want to make sure it's as compact as it can be. You can run this vacuum against it. This is the VSI. Now this is really quite cool. Again, I've got my little disclaimer down here for everyone. Got a bit confused for various reasons. Basically, what's really cool about this is that you can connect to a cloud system if you want to. So you could output data that you've run locally and spit it out, which is a technical term, spitting out, into a cloud storage area. So that might be good. Let's say if you're the Welsh Government and you're getting data sets from different authorities, you may pick up from their cloud areas and bring it in, and then you may send it back out. I know you can probably do all of this with the TLA that I mentioned from Canada earlier, but it's just that you can do it in some stuff as well. This was one where it doesn't need a disclaimer, unless I can't do my spelling correctly. Actually, you can sort of see that one. So chaining tasks into pipelines. This is a bit like doing a model in QGIS, a modeler, so you can piece things together. Basically, you can replay serialized commands, and you can say whether you want it into a temporary file or you want to keep it in memory. And it's all documented what's what you're allowed to. I think the beep is about to go off from Ian, so I'm really moving. I was jabbering too much at the start, sorry. So this gives, again, these are all in the PDF. I'm not hidden anything. This is the PDF that's on the website. But you can do a REST pipeline where you're doing various things and pulling things together. You can do the same with vectors in a certain command ways that you do that. Really getting close to the end now that you'll be happy to know. The examples I gave, even though I've given a couple, you might want to download a CSV with these things and create some points and polygons and publish to a web service. You might want to, if you had tree preservation orders within local authorities, quite often they're in points and polygons. So you'd have a point for each tree, but you might have an area for a woodland. You might want to bring them all together into a single file and output that, so you can automate that. You might want to take a huge layer that comes from DevFra and say, actually, I want to go and I want to cut a piece of it out. So this for the flood mapping, they give a national map out, but it's absolutely massive. So you might say, actually, I want to do that, take my local authority area and a buffer around it, and I then want to produce an output. Sort of makes sense where I'm coming from. I'm meant to be looking here so I know what's coming next. This has got some other things in here. That's the training. Oh no, I had a few more slides that were blank that didn't get printed. So I am really winging it now. We're coming very close to the end. Again, I've got some things down here that got a bit confused, so I've got no idea what this is. Maybe it's some format, I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's in there. There's actually a term, and I'll mention it tomorrow because I've got another presentation tomorrow. You're more than welcome to come if you wish. Called work slop. Has anyone heard of that? It's where, well, I wasn't aware of it until a couple of weeks ago, where AI is generating slop. And the problem is that it's taken people a long time to go through it. We use Gemini at work. I encourage it, but the rule is you've got to get a human to read whatever comes out to make sure it makes sense, unless you want to make it a little bit of a gimmick, which I have. Right, how did I do? Was it of interest? Do you have any questions for me? Excuse me.
Right, we have time for some questions.
I slowed down. I could have slowed down.
Because I was lying to Mike about how long it was, because I knew he'd overrun.
Everyone's aware of it? Who's tried GDAL 3? I'll ask questions back to you if there are no questions coming in. You've tried? Yep. I found it really interesting that you could do it on Ubuntu and you just point it to the install script and it just loads everything in for you. I mean, that's makes Windows installers look very antiquated, shall we say. Was it of interest? Oh, sorry.
Well done, Mike. The,
Thank you.
The SQL interface, is it just the kind of upstream programmer's responsibility to make sure you're not injecting kind of something a bit nasty through that SQL interface into a database?
I would say yes. I don't know. I think actually, I know totally different subject. Another TLA called a CVE. Who knows what a CVE is?
I do. I've got some.
Yeah, so they're vulnerabilities that get found, and there's a thing called OpenCVE.io. They actually have an OSGeo, as opposed to just Microsoft or Linux or whatever. They tell you what vulnerabilities become available in different software packages. They have one for OSGeo. They have one for map server specifically as well, so you can subscribe and find out what vulnerabilities are coming from. The reason I mention that is there have been some historically that have come through about vulnerabilities of SQL injections and all of that sort of stuff. But I don't know the extent of what GDAL.
I'm pretty sure GDAL will let you do injection. Don't think it standardises as well. You're supposed to know what you're doing.
Well, actually, I might be wrong. Just think back. In one of the slides that I flew over, I can't show you now because we've gone into blank screen mode, is there's an update statement stuff that you can do as well. Yeah. If you want to have a look at, there's a new means of doing things. There's a parameter you put into it, might do something to stop some erroneous things.
I think you can work your data set quite quickly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hasn't Grass had a command line interface that could do all this for decades?
I think it probably has, and as GDAL has as well. But so the short answer is yes. How much time have we got left? All I'm trying to highlight here is this is a new interface for their CLI that is a lot more standardised and it's very well documented. They had a couple of people, I'm not sure who did a Google Summer of Code and did a lot of the analysis of what all the different commands are on the existing GDAL and OGR to then try and help standardise it. Oh, lots of questions coming up now.
So Mike, so I understand this completely replaces OGR to OGR.
Yeah.
And what's the, so is that OGR to OGR being deprecated and being encouraged to move over?
You'd have to research more.
Yes, as of 3.11, I think the recommended is GDAL convert now, rather than having to remember whether it's GDAL translate or GDAL transform, which I can never remember even after 20 years.
Yeah, that's great.
Which order the command line options go in the two.
Yeah.
It's all been standardised.
And actually, that's a related question. So presumably, this is still machine bound. So there's no, with those pipelines, you can't set it to sort of fan out and use a cluster of machines or anything like that. It's optimized around a single box, I guess.
I guess
that's
so.
what SSH is for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, there could be works that are happening of doing a cloud version like they've done with GeoServer, where you can split things out and initiate things. I don't know. I don't know everything. The fifth.
You know that pipeline feature you highlighted? So obviously, like GeoTIFFs and big raster files, a lot of disk space. So can you basically from like pipeline operation step A, can you take an in-memory, you output like a item that's in memory, and then step B, grab that in-memory item.
Yep.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
And then if you had something, I think it's called another TLA, COG, which is at the cloud optimized GeoTIFF. If you had that somewhere, it will only read what it needs to pull down as well anyway.
Yeah, no, but if you can
just
chain together in memory objects,
that's
good.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to throw in TLAs whenever I can. So. Anything else?
Similar question to CLI about changing. Is the API side going to change that way as well, or is that?
Got to take the fifth again. Sorry,
I believe so.
Okay, so eventually it'll.
Yes, I think the API still has OGR and GDAL in the method names, but I think the aim is to slowly change those. I think, just from what I've seen on the dev list.
Well, it's good. Some questions. I didn't know whether there would be any. So,
for anybody who's thinking, oh well, it's okay, I use a proprietary system with 4 letters in its acronym, you're still using GDAL at the bottom of the stack. They are a sponsor.
Yeah, sorry, there's linked to the sponsors. Microsoft's a sponsor of GDAL, so is OGR. They're the main ones. And for my last slide, there we go.
There we go.
Still not displaying.
Oh, it's still not displaying. It looks really good here, honest.
There we go.
Thank you.